Okay, I want to talk real quickly to our good friend David Dodd. He's the CEO of GeoVax Labs. David, of course, is one of those guys that has been able to talk to us about COVID from the top down, but also monkeypox from the top down, and innovations in immunology. Because, boy, did we all get a lesson in immunology and viruses during COVID. We all thought one thing, and it obviously went to a different story. But David's kind of been able to sort of talk to us about what they're doing there at GeoVax, and then suddenly this monkeypox thing, comes into play, and it's an important topic, and I think it's important that we keep up with what they're doing at GeoVax. Once again, stock symbol GOVX. David Dodd joins us. David, how are you, bud? Great to see you. I know you've been crazy busy this week, and I'm glad you took some time out for us, sir.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be here.
Talk to us about top down. I always ask you, first of all, top down about COVID and about how we're doing. And then, of course, we got these monkeypox things happening and new viruses of the flu. So give us top down how we're doing as a country and how we're doing globally, in your opinion, since you're at the tip of the spear.
Well, the issue related to COVID-19 is what we've talked about. It continues to develop and to evolve, and it's not going to go away. So it's going to be here. Again, most people who are healthy are pretty well protected. Some people have many people have taken the existing vaccines, but again, I always emphasize that there are 15 to 20 million people in the United States who are individuals with depleted immune systems. They have blood cancers, they have they are dialysis patients, they have HIV, sickle cell anemia, they suffer from autoimmune diseases such as lupus, they're on immunosuppressive drugs because of organ transplantation. Pull that together, about 15, 20 million people. These are individuals for whom the existing and current vaccines simply are inadequate because their bodies are unable to mount a response to antibody stimulation, and that's what is delivered with the current vaccine.
How many people is that, David? David, how many people do you say that was ineffective?
15 to, well, not ineffective, but basically it just doesn't work for them. 15 to 20 million people.
Wow.
There are different buckets of different groups and all. Now, it's not the majority, obviously, people in the United States, but these are people who are at very high risk. They have comorbidities. And this is where our vaccine comes into play because we're, as you well know, heavily into the clinical testing right now in a phase 2 trial that's now expanding to multi-sites. We're actually discussing with locations outside the U.S. because there's such a need for such a vaccine that addresses not only the antibody side of the immune system, but for these individuals, even more importantly, the T cells or the cellular immunity, because if you don't mount a response to antibody stimulation, you need to be protected from your T cells. And that's what our vaccine is all constructed to do and why we are taking it forward. I mean, we're expanding the study, as I mentioned, talking to interested parties in different parts of Europe and all, as well as in Canada, where there's a real need out there. And right now, our vaccine is the furthest along, the most advanced in clinical testing of such a next generation vaccine.
David, so COVID's obviously been the main focus on this. I've heard monkeypox as well, but what other kind of diseases and vaccines can this translate to? Because I'm sure there's plenty of other vaccines that people just can't take because they have health or compromising issues.
It's a good question because people who have depleted immune systems, most vaccines that are out there today, depending on whatever the diseases they're targeting, they are structured to induce a very strong antibody response. And the problem for these individuals are that their bodies have been depleted or ablated by the ability to mount a response to antibody stimulation. And that's where the whole field of T cells or T cell responses or the types of vaccines such as ours come into play. Because it could be, for instance, even with people who have depleted immune responses, their ability to respond to some of the existing vaccines, or even as we see the incoming newer vaccines dealing with like Zika virus, which is really an issue among women of reproductive age in the Southern Hemisphere. So that would be an issue. Just so many you read about these, you haven't even heard of them, chikungunya, dengue, these other types of diseases, all of these. If you have such an immune system, you basically are at risk, and the monoclonal antibodies, certainly for COVID-19, have not worked. And we know that now. It's well recognized. So loading these patients up with multiple current vaccines of the mRNA, the Moderna, the Pfizer, and also loading them up with monoclonal antibodies is really doing nothing for them.
Yeah, I went to a Himalayan restaurant last night. Hey, what did I have? Chicken dunga. Come on, that's an ugly one. Hey, David, I have to ask you. You know, the technologies you guys use are well established. We've talked about this before because I think it's important. You know, your processes are recognized by regulatory authorities as far as safety goes. I think that's important because one of the biggest concerns, we've talked about this a number of times during COVID, was the race to a vaccine. And indeed, I don't think any shortcuts. FDA is not going to let you take shortcuts, but they certainly let the folks go to the front of the line. But let's talk about what you've done because it really is. It's really remarkable that you guys have been able to stay within the box there, but also reach your tentacles outside of COVID, as evidenced by the monkeypox news you put out there just maybe 2-3 weeks ago. Talk about that.
Well, that's true. You know, we use a technology. The basis of our infectious disease vaccines is actually another vaccine that has been around since the late 60s. It was originally developed to be a safe enough smallpox vaccine so that people with compromised immune systems could be vaccinated against smallpox. Prior to that, there were subpopulations for whom the smallpox vaccine was too harsh. We couldn't basically clear the world of smallpox. So they developed this vaccine, which does not replicate in humans or in mammalian cells. But it can be produced out of chicken cells. And that has actually been the downside of the vaccine because producing in chicken cells or utilizing chicken cells is a very slow, cumbersome process. So it became relegated to a very good technology, but only for niche markets. No. However, what we announced 2 weeks ago is we announced that GeoVax is going forward. We have completed all the scientific work to validate that we're going to move forward to a more modern, non-cell dependent type of chicken egg technology that will be using what is known as a continuous manufacturing process, which will be able to produce the volumes that you see with the vaccines such as from J&J and AstraZeneca, et cetera. So we'll be just as competitive as others. We made that announcement 2 weeks ago. We're quite excited about it because it's been 2 years into getting there, but we've now validated it, demonstrated it, so we went public with it. And we'll be moving forward further this year. And one of the candidates will be our ability to produce and be the first U.S.-based supplier of the vaccine that prevents both monkeypox and smallpox, or I guess mpox we should be calling it now.
So, David, I want to get off the subject of the vaccine specifically. I kind of want to talk about you a little bit here. I'm reading that you have seen acquisitions and divestitures over $2.5 billion. Now, I'm going to go ahead and assume that's not much of a medical background, but a guy like you really drives a product like this forward. So please tell me, where does a guy like you come into play to help move the ball forward in this process of getting these complex vaccines to the consumer?
Sure. So you know, I'm what's known as a general manager, a business person, et cetera. I'm not a scientist. You know, I'm actually trained as a mathematician, but that goes so far back, it's hard for me to add and subtract still. But basically, I was fortunate in my career to be able to move into the business side. And in doing that, I learned that my job is primarily assembling, you know, very highly productive, highly capable individuals, sometimes having to arbitrate because they're so good they may have very strong opinions, but setting goals and setting a focus, and many times, you know, acquisitions are a means to an end. It's enabling you to build your portfolio, build what you're going to deliver to the marketplace, be able to achieve value faster, quicker, and hopefully more efficient than you otherwise would be doing. And so my role is to keep the organization focused. So we set up a goal of 2+ years ago that said we want to get beyond this limitation with our technology that does not enable us to compete with the other vaccine players for areas where there's a need for high yield, high capacity manufacturing. So my goal was, let's put a stake in the ground. We're either going to figure out how to do it, or we're going to be relegated to niche markets, or we're going to have to look for additional technology. And what we announced a couple of weeks ago was that we have successfully demonstrated and validated that we can go forward, and we're in that process of doing that. So my goal is largely to ensure that as an organization, you know, we set a certain a number of goals that we have the capacity to address. We don't get ahead of our blocking or take on too much, et cetera. And then to stay focused and have, like everybody has the sort of monitoring systems that ensures that we stay focused, stay on track, because it's always interesting to start thinking about something new, but you've got to get stuff accomplished to move a business forward. And that's really what my role is all about.
His name is David Dodd. David Dodd, of course, Chairman and CEO of GeoVax Labs. David, I can't wait to get you back in San Diego. I'm glad that we're still talking about this because you're saving lives over there, pal. David Dodd, GeoVax, GeoVX.
I want to be like David when I grow up.
I want to be like David, too. Innovations in immunology. Go to geovax.com. More Big Biz coming up.